It's good to be here. And I know that in this seminar series, you hear a lot about like what you're not allowed to do. Don't make up those great research results, for instance. This talk is about something positive that might be considered an ethical obligation, at least if you do publicly funded research, but I think something that you might consider an obligation to society even if you're actually not receiving federal dollars for science, and that is to communicate. So this is not a no we can't talk. This is a yes we can talk. And I hope that that's a good change of pace for you. First, why am I giving it? I want to tell you a little bit about me and why I talk about the communication of science. Why do I even know anything about this? When I teach people how to do PowerPoint presentations, this is what you would call the setup. Okay. So I'm not a scientist. I'm a writer. I write about science. But originally, I just wanted to be a writer. I could have really written about anything. Mostly I just wanted to write, but there was a scientist who had a really huge influence on me growing up and pushed me in this direction. Basically communicated science to me in a way that made it resonate with who I am and made it part of my identity, which is why you now see me here. And this is my grandfather, Gerald Cole, the late Gerald Cole. He was a limnologist, that's the study of freshwater ecosystems, at Arizona State University. He was a very memorable, irascible scientist character, totally intolerant of pseudoscience and nonsense. And he brought us up that way. And he thought science was a great refutation to anything having to do with Ronald Reagan, actually. I remember that. And if there's something that drove him mad, it was young Earth creationists, right? He hated the creationists. And positively, he interpreted much of life through the lens of evolution. So this is who we grew up with, and he imparted all of this way of thinking to us. In fact, it went so far that there was this invisible friend that he talked to for us while we were growing up, and the friend's name was Chuck, which was short for Chuck Darwin. So we literally grew up with the theory of evolution, empty chair there at the dinner table. Chuck was a bit of a drinker, like many scientists. And so my grandfather's example made me want to be the kind of writer that serves as a connector between science, politics, and society. So that's sort of what I am. So just let me give you the diagram. Darwin didn't use evolution until the very end of Origin of Species, didn't use the word. He called it descent with modification. So I'm descended with modification from my grandfather. So I became a writer, I wrote about science, and I wrote about the disconnect between science and society. I did it in a lot of different books, a lot of different places. Most relevant for our purposes today is this one, 2009, Unscientific America, which was about what it says. Americans are, not only do they not know a lot about science, and we know this, a lot of them don't know how long it takes for the Earth to go around the sun. Don't laugh. But they also aren't engaged with science. They don't know what scientists are like, and why they should know what scientists are like. And there's all kinds of statistics in the book to establish this. I'll give you one from a survey a couple of years old now. But they called people up and they said, name a scientific role model. And 44% of people could not give an answer to the question. Right? Nothing comes to mind. Silence on the phone. The other percent does have an answer. Who do you think their top three choices are? Bill Nye. Okay. I know who he is, but they don't. Any others?
Albert Einstein.
Einstein. I heard a lot of Einstein. Any other suggestions? Jonas Salk. No, they don't know who that is. So the top three choices, just steal yourselves. These were the top three choices. So you got Einstein right. So America's scientific role models were either not scientists or not alive. So it was very natural to say, hey, we've got to do something about this. That's kind of what the book was about. And that eventually led, I think the book came out at the right time because there was a growing wave of interest in science communication, and that's what I posed as the solution. So I then got wrapped up in being part of the solution, which my other books have not led to an outcome like this where suddenly I have to go and start teaching and training and it becomes a whole separate career and thing that I do. But that's what happened with this particular book. So you heard, we now with the National Science Foundation, we go out, we train scientists, we've trained several thousand of them, and we train more and more every month. We like to say that the goal is to create deadly ninjas of science communication. This is ninja training camp, and science communication techniques are, like the throwing star and the garrote and the, I don't know, what are other ninja weapons? I need to study up on that. And we actually call ourselves now, the organization, me and my colleagues, we call ourselves Ninja Communications. And I want to just give you a taste of the workshop, and I'm going to tell you more about what it is and what we do. But I work with TV producers, which is great, because they do stuff like this. So that's 1 minute, a 2-day workshop. And what I want to do with this talk is tell you more about what we teach, why we teach it the way we do, and why, and this is the bottom line, audiences pay attention when you say that. If you're a scientist and you want to communicate today, this is the age of self-empowerment. This stuff is cheap, easy, and you don't need a journalistic intermediary to do it for you. That's the punchline. That's kind of one of the organizing themes of what we teach. And I'm going to take you through some of the workshop to show you how we get there. So my colleague Dan Egan, he actually worked with Carl Sagan at PBS. He starts off the workshop by asking a simple question. Why does communication fail? Why does science communication fail? Anybody have any ideas? We know it fails, right?
Scientists don't speak English. Yeah.
C. Yes, that's absolutely true. Anything else? Jargon. Jargon is the big problem. Anything else? Not aimed at the right level, which is similar, related. You don't have to put up hands. You can just shout it out. Fear of mathematics on the part of the public. It's terrifying.
The learners just don't care. It doesn't matter to them.
The audience doesn't care.
Unless they have a family member.
But they could be made to care. Well, I think it's all of the above. I think it's actually, we say that the biggest thing is the failure to plan. But the audience definitely has heard scientists try to communicate before. They're somewhat dimly aware of this. And one problem is that they have this stereotype of what it's like. And they're very terrified. And the stereotype looks like this. And it's so great that we have people in white coats in here. So check this out.
For a number of years now, work has been proceeding in order to bring perfection to the crudely conceived idea of a transmission that would not only supply inverse reactive current for use in unilateral phase detractors, but would also be capable of automatically synchronizing cardinal grammars. Such an instrument is the turboencapulator. Now, basically, the only new principle involved is that instead of power being generated by the relative motion of conductors and fluxes, it is produced by the modial interaction of magnetoreluctance and capacitive directance. The original machine had a faceplate of prefamulated amulite surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing in such a way that the two sparking bearings were in a direct line with a panometric span. The latter consisted simply of 6 hydrocoptic Marsal vanes so fitted to the ambifation lunar wane shaft that side fumbling was effectively prevented. The main winding was of the normal Lotus O delta type placed in panendermic semi-boloid slots of the stator, every 7th conductor being connected by a non-reversible Termi pipe to the differential girdle spring on the up end of the grammar. The turbo-encabulator has now reached a high level of development, and it's being successfully used in the operation of nover-trunnions. Moreover, whenever a fluorescent score motion is required, it may also be employed in conjunction with a drawn reciprocation dingle arm to reduce soil repleneration. It's not cheap, but I'm sure the government will buy it.
Okay. So this is a spoof. It was done by Rockwell International to make fun of their own engineers. But it captures something real about what people perceive, the way they perceive science. Is you're banned from coming across that way. You can laugh about it, and that's because it's a little too accurate, right? So what do you do about the problem of jargon? You have to translate what you know into a clear message with everything extraneous pruned away, and just the essence still there, and the essence has to be something where people instantly go, aha, I get it, now I understand what that means. What does that look like? This is what we spend 3 hours on. We have worksheets, we have diagrams that basically take what's in your head and tear all that stuff away until you actually have the essence that you need to have. But generally, some of the attributes of what a good message are going to look like, it's definitely going to be concise. Okay, it's not you have to boil down what you want to communicate to something that can be expressed in 150 words, something that you can say in an elevator at a cocktail party by a water cooler. Right? Something very short, and you know it works if the person goes, aha, you mean kind of like this, and they immediately get it and they start thinking about how it relates to them. Now necessarily, if it has to be concise, it probably has to be jargon-free because you don't have many words to use. You don't want to waste them on words that Homo sapiens don't understand. So jargon's banned. But you also have to be careful for this whole family of words that have a different meaning for you than for members of the audience, right? I mean, these are words they actually know, but they create confusion. Words like theory. I think that's kind of one of the classic ones. So for scientists, theory is this is an explanation that unites a large body of evidence so that it all fits under this organizing rubric, and you're like, score, that's really great, we have a theory. And they're like, theory's a hunch, I have 5 theories before breakfast, so what? You have to be careful for all those kinds of words. Another thing it's going to be is personal. In other words, it's going to be strategically tailored and created with the audience in mind and with a particular member or members of the audience in mind, and you know something about this person, and you know the context in which your appeal to them or your attempt to communicate with them is probably going to go over well and probably not going to go over well. So a lot of time spent on just taking what's in your head and tearing all the jargon away, pruning it down, getting to the essence. The simple is harder than the complex, Steve Jobs put it. And then you need devices for delivery, so we teach the soundbite. Amazingly, scientists are not so down on learning about soundbites anymore. In the last 5 years, there's been a transformation. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy. That's a soundbite. Soundbites are incredibly powerful. They can define a person, an era, a concept. This one defined a person. Basically, a soundbite is a short, pithy, striking statement that captures in miniature everything you're trying to say. And you have to use them because it makes your message sticky so that people remember it and they repeat it and it gets propagated. And there's no choice. Yes, it absolutely simplifies things, but if you're going to be quoted on television, you don't have sound bites, you probably won't be quoted at all. Scientists have used them. God doesn't play dice with the universe. Einstein was a great scientist and a great soundbite machine. I'm sure journalists of the era loved him. Go to Einstein, he'll give you a great quote right away. 100 years without Darwin are enough, hearkening back to my whole heritage. That was what scientists said when they wanted more teaching of evolution in schools in the 50s and 60s, leading to all of the subsequent political fights that occurred. So there would have been a time when I got a lot of pushback on sound bites because people would say, you're dumbing it down, you're simplifying. And we still get some of that. There's always a hand that goes up, and we have what I call the ethical conversation about whether you can dumb things down. And we can have that conversation at the end. Let me tell you where I really get resistance. All right? Anything having to do with social media. Boy, Twitter. I cannot tell you how many scientists loathe Twitter. All right? And we started putting it front and center in our workshops, and we get evaluated, and I'm the guy who teaches it, so it drives down my averages dramatically, which drives me nuts. So I went through the evaluations trying to figure out why scientists don't like Twitter. These are some of the things they said. Stop pushing Twitter. I can see the value, but the constant feed was not only distracting, it detracted from the other points. We have screens where the audience, if we had them in here, you guys would be tweeting, what did Mooney have for breakfast? Mooney's, I'm getting bored right about here. You'd be saying that, and the screens are just moving all the time. And we think that it gets people more engaged. I do not want to tweet. I'd need to be sold on the value before wanting to sign up for an account. Sorry. By pushing twitting, you're pushing Americans into ADHD as a society. Very bummed out by the twittering. How many people in here use Twitter? Not too bad. I would convert you if I had a lot of time. I would get you all using it. So I get all this, and I'm like, what's going on here? Why do people, and that's the main, I think, that really kind of captures some of the main resistance. Like, I don't need something else to do. You're making Americans ADHD. I was pretty confused trying to figure out, like, what is up with this Twitter resistance. Another thing we teach is that every good PowerPoint presentation has a lolcat in it. It's very important to communication. And I think that the resistance is sort of captured in this cartoon. So check it out. The fear is that if I engage in online communication about science, basically I'm going to be entering into this world where all my time is consumed. All right? I'm going to have no social life anymore. I'm going to have no time for grants, teaching, and research. I'm just going to spend all my time sitting in front of the computer in nothing but my underwear, trying to refute all the dumb people on the internet, which is impossible. It's like whack-a-mole. It's like a terrible sentence of scientific whack-a-mole, and it'll never end. Actually, it's not right. That's not what Twitter's like. I spend, 5 minutes a day on there, but my following grows every day. It's very easy to use once you do it, but I think that captures some of the resistance that we still haven't gotten past. By the way, Twitter actually, ironically, full of weird jargon, a lot like science. I don't know how many of you guys know any of these. It has like major jargon that you must know, and you should all get on Twitter and you should figure this out. It's crucial for communicating science. But also there's minor jargon. Has anyone ever heard of a dweet? It's a tweet sent while intoxicated. So in one of our workshops, someone came up with a new Twitter term called a sweet, which is a tweet sent about scientific content. So we like that. But we advise not dweeting sweets. So we have fun with this stuff. And another thing we do is mock interviews where basically, and you're lucky this is not going to happen today. People are taken from the audience. We sort of scope them out, and they're pulled up on stage, put in a chair, and we have a talk show, and it's naturally modeled on the Colbert Report. So if Stephen Colbert was going to interview scientists, and he does, what would he do? He would definitely make fun of jargon. I think that would be almost too easy. So I had a researcher, and you'll appreciate this, who said, well, we do work on mouse models. And I said, well, are they attractive? That's another one of those words. Model is like theory, right? It means something different to them than it does to you. You have to be as a journalist, it took me a year to figure out what a mathematical model was in climate change. I finally figured it out. There's some other tricks. Marine biologists, for some reason, they tend to be like really interested in communication of all the different, and I've taught nanotech people, I've taught all kinds of people. Marine biologists, I don't know, it's like the Jacques Cousteau thing or something. So you have to mess them up, you have to trip them up. This is a question that always works. You say, okay, that's interesting, that's great, but here's what I've always wanted to know about marine life. How do whales have sex? Think about it. I mean, they're in the water, like, they have to get up against something? Do the other whales have to help? How does this, and it's over. The interview is over. So this is a live scene of a mock interview with an expert on sweet potatoes at Mississippi State University, where not all of my comments are funny like Colbert. I said, do you ever stop in your research and say, I think, therefore I am? And that was groans. So you're laughing, but that was groans. So there's a lot of hit and miss. There's a lot of craziness at these events. But I think our students get a great deal out of the workshop, and we've learned a lot by doing it. We've completely revised it from what we used to do. We've also created, and this is the last thing I'll just do by way of summary, we've created a public event, which is a lot of fun. And it's sort of a showcase of really good science communication. And here is the intro. So we did this at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. We had Science Idol. Scientists gave 3-minute talks, and they were basically judged by judges, not by the audience, in an American Idol format. And it was really revealing because we had a rapper who was good. We had an incredibly funny talk about how human sex lives and insect sex lives are related to each other. People just laughing the whole time. But the guy who won, and here he is, Tom. I was the host, and these are two of the judges, Indre Viscontis, a neuroscientist, and Corey Powell is the editor of Discover magazine. The guy who won, Tom, he won because he had a message. It was really clear in 3 minutes, and I'll tell you what his message is because he summarized it using Twitter hashtags. He said, everybody's mad at their weatherman because they always know that the forecast isn't right. They look out their window and they look on the internet and they say, that's not the same thing I'm seeing right here. And then they probably get on Twitter and they send hashtag weatherfail. And he says, if they knew what it was like, what we do, if they knew how much better we've gotten, if you look at the track of Superstorm Sandy and the errors compared to what the errors were 10 years ago when we track a storm like that, I think they would actually appreciate how hard it is to do what we do and how good we're getting at it. And next time they send a tweet, it would be hashtag weather respect. That was basically his talk. It was longer than that, but it was so clear and crisp, and what stood out was that he had boiled it down. Everybody else, they had style, they had performance, but he had a clear thought that everybody was going to remember. And so I think that was really effective. So these are some of the things we teach. Let me tell you what we do not teach. We don't teach you to just wait around for the phone to ring so that a journalist will call and then you can suddenly communicate for 15 minutes. We don't do media training because that's a passé way of thinking. That's from the newspaper era. You know, the days when everybody read the New York Times or the Washington Post and everybody watched the same alphabet soup of TV channels, ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, and it was a shared information environment. It's not the communication environment we live in anymore, and it's certainly not the communication environment for science. And the media of today, especially over the last 5 years, but it's been a longer period, they've dropped coverage of science. And now that the media has stabilized with a new business model that's starting to happen, we can see that there's not going to be as much of it as there used to be. There's been a whole decline of science journalism. All the intermediaries, the gatekeepers, the people who understood science and actually carried it to the public, they've all kind of changed or moved on to something else, or in some cases they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do. Here's Andrew Revkin. He's been very successful, but now as a blogger, not as the official science and environment correspondent for the New York Times, and he teaches. That's what a lot of longtime science journalists do. Pew did a study a couple of years ago, found that if you watch 5 hours of cable news, you can expect to see 1 minute of science and technology coverage. The Shorenstein Center at Harvard did a study, I think updated in 2009, showing that over the past 15, 20 years, there's been a 2/3 decline in the number of newspapers that actually have weekly science sections. Okay? That used to be a standard part of the information diet, is that you actually got the paper and there'd be a science section. So if you weren't interested, you at least had to throw it out. Right? Now it just doesn't exist anymore. So what does this mean? I mean, you could say this is a disaster, and a lot of people said that as it was happening, including me, repeatedly. And it is kind of a tragedy that that's not the information stream that we're all used to and that we all share as a society any longer, but it's also empowering not to have a gatekeeper. And there's never a better time to communicate directly to the public, so you could see it as the age of empowerment. And so when we do, we definitely teach, if a journalist calls you, these are some of the things you want to do, but that's not what we focus on. Rather, we focus on do-it-yourself communication. And the first step of that I already told you about, figuring out what your message is, figuring out how to make it memorable. And then once you've got that core message, and once you've got it boiled down, and we use a triangle device that everybody really likes, that they write their message on the inside and their 3 points around the outside. Once you've got that, then you take it and you take it to different kinds of communication, and you see how the triangle plays out, or the message plays out as a PowerPoint, and you see how it plays out as a video, and you see how it plays out as a blog post or an op-ed or some piece of writing. And it turns out that once you've got the message, it translates very easily into the different media. So you can do a TED caliber presentation. You can make a video that's going to go viral. You can blog something and then tweet it to social media and spread the word that way. And I just want to tell you a little bit about each of these different media and some things to be aware of. This is sort of in the spirit of showing what you can do easily. So PowerPoint. I'm going to take a flying leap and guess that everyone in this room has seen terrible PowerPoints, right? Awful PowerPoints. What are they like? Huh? Right. I mean, Dan teaches this, Dan Agan, and he says that they basically pull a Thomas Jefferson, right? And they start writing declarations. This is not what PowerPoint is for. And then he adds, and not only do they have the audacity to try to make you read, but they turn their back to you and they read it to you. There's many things that we teach at PowerPoint, but one is that this is banned, not allowed. And the funny thing about it is that part of this is happening because people don't understand the technology of PowerPoint. There's a mode of PowerPoint that is designed to make this not happen, but people don't know what it is. Who knows what PowerPoint presenter view is? Not bad. Okay, maybe 10, 20%. So this is worth the price of admission because you'll never do this again. These are meant to be in the notes, right? And if you run it in presenter view, which you can't do unless you have two screens, okay? You have to extend the desktop. This is in a PC. But if you have two screens, you can make it so they see one thing and you see another. And this is what it looks like to you. You guys are seeing whatever I want you to see, but I'm seeing this, right? I'm seeing what's actually on the screen, my notes, and what slides are next. Changes everything. Hallelujah. It's amazing. Scientific conferences still run the PowerPoints so that the two screens are mirroring each other, thereby encouraging the bad notes on the screen behavior. All you have to do is have one thing on one screen, one thing on another. Anyway, we teach a lot more than that, but that itself is kind of eye-opening, I think. So you can easily learn to deliver a killer public talk. Somewhat harder and more alien, but far from unachievable, is learning how to make an amazing video about your research. So we travel. One of our trainers is a producer named Joe Schreiber, who spent 20 years at NBC covering sports. And this is great to have somebody from that world come in and look at the communication of science because he's great at it, but it's because he comes from a completely different world. He's won a number of Emmys, and what he explains is that the barriers to making video have completely collapsed. It's a lot like what happened in the science journalism field. There's been another kind of media transformation, where it used to be that these great producers had these wonderful salaries because they had all these technical skills that other people couldn't match. And now, sorry, these are the parts of this. Now, you can pay less than $1,000 for a flip cam, or you can just use your phone. Okay? You record your video or use your iPad, record your video, and then on your computer, there's software, Windows Movie Maker, or what have you, that tells you how to make video out of it. And then dissemination is really easy through YouTube. So that's what everybody's doing. It's the age of empowerment. And you can do this quite well. With Joe's help at the workshop, he can film a scientist giving their message. And then it depends a lot on what kind of visuals they have. You guys all want to have images from your research, and you all want to have videos from your research. And if they give that stuff to him, he can, in about an hour, produce something really quite good. And if you have a little bit more time, he can produce something that is great. And I just want to show you one of these. And the reason that this worked is because the scientist had a message, had great sound bites, but most important, provided, because he's media savvy, provided our producer with all of these images from his research. And this is what resulted.
The project is babies driving robots, babies and robots together, and that usually brings some interest because babies and robots don't supposed to go together. What we focus on in our lab is trying to maximize the exploratory ability of kids with significant impairments like cerebral palsy. And as infants and toddlers grow up, they grow up fast. They're moving, thinking, talking, interacting with the environment. The kids I see with cerebral palsy have mobility problems that short-circuit that. They don't crawl when they should. They don't get up and walk when they should. They don't play in the playground when they should. They don't cause havoc at home like they should. 2- and 3-year-olds shouldn't be sitting still passively. They should be causing havoc. They should be putting bananas in the DVD player. They should be getting in trouble in grocery stores. And so I'm a creator of bad behavior. I'm trying to get toddlers with significant brain impairments up and going again. When we look at kids in school classrooms, like we're here in the Early Learning Center, when we use the center to look at how mobility and immobility specifically impacts a child's ability to learn and socialize with peers, what we see is a striking difference than typical. What we provide is power mobility devices and abilities for kids to rapidly, starting at 6 months of age, become mobile again. So very quickly in their life, instead of waiting until 3, 4, and 5 years to get your first power mobility device, we've devised small robotic devices that get you driving at 6 months. I get phone calls from parents who have our robots at home saying literally, "You've created a monster." And they say, "Thank you very much." With a tear in their eye, they say, "I didn't realize what I was missing until I said my first 'come back here right now.'" The barriers aren't big. We can do this. We can close it. And those thousands and thousands of kids every year in the U.S. and hundreds of thousands of kids worldwide can have mobility. And if you want a test of like how bad mobility could be, this weekend go put yourself in a corner and duct tape your mouth shut for Saturday and Sunday, and you'll call me with a check. Because you'll go, "I didn't realize how critical my mobility, how easy my mobility is." So it's just that subtle shift in thinking. I think we'll get it.
What were the sound bites that he used? I mean, this guy's good because he's learned the technique. What do you remember them? You've created a monster. Thank you very much. They should be putting bananas in the DVD player. Right, this guy's good and he knows what he's doing, but it isn't really that hard. All he did was set up some cameras, during regular work, and give my guy a couple of pictures and sit with him and know his material. And that's what can result. Okay, and then there's Twitter. So then I teach writing an article based on having a clear message and then using Twitter to spread it. And what you're looking at here is one of the surprising and little-known reasons that you should use social media to communicate, which is the research on tweetations. It turns out that if your work is tweeted about, it will be cited more on average. And this is a study showing that. Basically what you've got is a variety of different scientific papers, and over time, over the space of 7 days, the curves show how many tweets about the papers there were. And then in parentheses, you've got how many citations there were, and so they demonstrate a correlation between work that gets media attention in social media and work that actually has scientific influence. Now, you guys are all smart, so you're like, what's the causal direction here? Right? Probably both, I would say. But before we had social media, before we had Twitter, a similar relationship was shown with having your work covered in the New York Times and having it be cited. So it's probably the case that the work that is easily digestible to people makes sense, gets media attention because they go, aha, gets tweeted because they go, aha, that's cool. But also, the research community has the same reaction. Either it's more on their radar, or it's also better communicated. And so they get it, and then it starts to change the way that they think and influence them, and then they go on to cite it. So this is one of the ways in which being a good communicator is good, not just for getting the word out, the moral role that I talked about, but for your success in science. Sometimes you can do really well with social media. This is an article I did, one of my most viral, about the science of why people deny science. And everybody's got the buttons now, the social media buttons on their webpage. And this one was Facebook liked 29,000 times, and it had been tweeted 3,200 as of this point in time. It's more now, but that translated into 500,000 people reading it. So this is how it works now. You figure out what your message is. You put it out there through video. You put it out there through writing, whatever. You have the message. You translate it into one of these forms. You spread it by social media. And sometimes it just works. It actually works, and it goes everywhere. That's how powerful the tools can be. And these are some of the things that we try to teach. Now, all of this, it can definitely help to engage the public. It can also help to improve your scientific career, or if you're not going to have a bench science career, research science career, you're thinking about something else, well, I can tell you the communication is going to help in other pursuits as well. So if we can get this message about the importance of scientists communicating to really take off, and I think it's starting, but if we can continue to spread it, I think the payoff is in many areas. Not only does the public get more engaged, but scientists themselves get celebrated more because they are not seen as that guy talking about the turbo-encabulator. Rather, hopefully someday, they will be seen as rock stars. So I want to end with some words about how it ought to be, the world that we could create together, if you will. From my friend Matthew Chapman, who I wish my grandfather had known him because he is the great-great-grandson of Charles Darwin. And he happens to be a successful screenwriter and author. And he loves science, it's in the genes. Plus, he's British, so he's very funny. And this is what he said. Instead of being derided as geeks or nerds, scientists should be seen as courageous realists and the last great heroic explorers of the unknown. They should get more money, more publicity, better clothes, more sex, and free rehab when the fame goes to their heads. That's the world I want to live in. How about you?